Hello, I'm Jack Marr. Please join me in celebrating Evergreen, Colorado's 150th birthday. It was 150 years ago that Dwight Wilmot petitioned the U.S. Postal Service to establish a post office here with the name Evergreen. Evergreen has a storied history, going back to the native Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people who lived and hunted here for centuries. Living here in encampments much like this. From a tiny ranching and logging village reached only by rough wagon roads, to the vibrant residential mountain community of today near I-70. So let's take a magical history tour through Evergreen and visit some of its most fascinating and significant places. Colorado statehood was 1 year old in 1877, when several French-Canadian ranch families in Evergreen decided to build a schoolhouse for their children's education. With no assistance from others and through their own hard work, the Roy and Vezina families constructed a small log school on the Vezina Ranch. Family members often became teachers, and through the years, as many as 23 students and their teacher were crammed into the tiny 15 by 20-foot building. When a new, much larger brick school plus the Cub Creek School were built nearby in the 1920s, the little one-room schools in the area closed down. But Buffalo Park School was preserved by Mrs. Carrie Vezina on her ranch. When she sold the ranch in the 1940s, she had the school building dismantled and moved to her new home in Highwan Hills. She was a longtime member of the Evergreen Women's Club, and when she planned to move again, she urged the club to take ownership of the old school and save it. That they did, and they had the school moved to the grounds of Evergreen High School, and shortly afterward to the Wilmot Elementary School property. Teachers at Wilmot used the Buffalo Park School as a learning tool to teach students about the whole atmosphere of a primitive one-room school in the 1800s. Volunteers from nearby Highwan Homestead Museum helped the teachers recreate this 1800 schoolroom. After the Evergreen Women's Club disbanded in 2010, the school lacked maintenance and fell into disrepair. Now the school will become the property of Evergreen Park and Recreation District, and it will be moved to Marshdale Park, where students from Marshdale and Wilmot Elementary will visit, and the old school will again become a historic treasure of Evergreen's educational legacy. It remains the oldest log-structured one-room schoolhouse in the state of Colorado. Dr. Mary Josepha Williams Douglas, known as Dr. Joe, opened a private sanitarium on Pearl Street in Denver in 1891. 2 years later, Dr. Joe purchased Evergreen property she dubbed Camp Neosho. After Dr. Joe and her mother, Mary Neosho Williams, purchased the Camp Neosho property, they hired local builder Jock Spence to convert a hay barn into a one-room cabin. About 1898, he enlarged the cabin by adding a 2-story octagonal tower to the front. There was also an addition in back, probably housing a summer kitchen and storage. The Douglases had Jock Spence expand Camp Neosho into a masterpiece of rustic log architecture, with 25 rooms and numerous outbuildings. Dr. Joe's husband, Episcopalian priest Father Charles Winfred Douglas, was fascinated by Southwestern Native culture, making many treks through the Southwest to explore and collect Native art. Their son, Eric Douglas, helped establish the Native Arts Collection at the Denver Art Museum.
I am the grandson of Eric Douglas. We knew Eric Douglas as Poppy. That was his family name. And Eric was a pioneer in so many ways. Not only did he elevate and champion the art of Native Americans at a time when a lot of that art wasn't truly appreciated, but he also innovated the way in which it was going to be shown. So at the Denver Art Museum, he developed techniques that were really ahead of their time. And I'll just give you some quick examples. My grandfather always liked to say that the only people that really liked going to a museum back in the early 1900s were eggheads. He called them eggheads because a lot of the stuff, he said, was trapped under glass. And so he brought it out of those cabinets and he put it on top of pedestals and into niches. He would paint backgrounds to match where the object was coming from. If there was a Hopi seed pot, for example, he would try to make sure that the background reflected the clay that it was made with and the environment. He took these techniques and he just kept advancing them. And actually, a lot of what he pioneered back then in the 1920s and 30s is still in use today throughout the world in museums.
Oklahoma oil man Darst Buchanan and his family became acquainted with Evergreen while attending an oil industry convention at the Troutdale Hotel in 1930. They purchased the old Camp Neosho property after Dr. Joe Douglas's death in 1938, renaming and expanding it as the Highwan Ranch. Through sale and lease, the ranch eventually covered some 30,000 acres. Highwan is an Anglo-Saxon term meaning members of a family household or religious house. The Buchanans maintained a herd of about 750 prize-winning Highwan Hereford cattle, with grazing property not only in the Evergreen area, but down the hill in South Denver. By the 1960s, the Buchanans began to sell off parts of their ranch, including today's Elk Meadow Park, Highwan Golf Club, and Buchanan Park. The new Jefferson County Open Space Program bought the old Camp Neosho property, and it opened in August 1975 as the Highwan Homestead Museum, with Heritage Grove next door as a popular spot for community events. The properties have operated ever since through a partnership between Jefferson County Open Space and Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society. Placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1974, the museum and grove are now known as Highwan Heritage Park and Museum, celebrating 50 years of serving the public as a jewel of Evergreen and Jefferson County history. A look at a photo of downtown Evergreen about 1901 shows the little white Methodist church in the far right corner. Another view from 1925 reveals that the church has now become Prince McCracken's Drugstore and Dance Hall, where movies were sometimes shown. Next door is the Evergreen Hotel. This 1920s photo shows the movies were sometimes shot in Evergreen in front of the drugstore, perhaps starring Morrison's own Western star, Pete Morrison. The Buchanan family, owners of the Highwan Ranch, bought the old drugstore in the 1930s and turned the dance hall into the Roundup restaurant and bar. But it wasn't until local businessman Ross Grimes bought the building in 1964 and it became the Red Ram Bar and Restaurant a few years later that worldwide fame arrived. Under the management of Denny Mintle, an indoor balcony was built of scrap lumber, and Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Woody Herman, Buddy Rich, and other jazz greats were booked. Cowboys mingled with hippies in the rowdy atmosphere of the 1960s as they enjoyed the great music played within. The Red Ram sign still stands proudly atop the Little Bear building to this day. A sound system, sound booth, horseshoe-shaped bar, and boardwalk in front were added. Soon, top rock and roll performers joined the greats of jazz in performing on Little Bear's new stage. Such stars as Willie Nelson, Leon Russell, Maria Muldaur, Chris Christopherson, Rita Coolidge, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, The Fray, Michael Martin Murphy, and many others have appeared at the Bear. Meg Ryan, Johnny Depp, and Neil Young are among the celebrities who have enjoyed musical performances there. Willie Nelson, who lived nearby up Upper Bear Creek Road, would sometimes wander into town with his guitar and jam with whatever band was playing at the Little Bear that night. One of Little Bear's most memorable attributes is the massive collection of bras hanging over the stage. Judy Dronimus recalled that it was the band Timothy B and Rural Route 3 in the 1980s that started the trend by daring the women in the audience to take off their tops in exchange for t-shirts. The women did him one better by also removing their bras and flinging them up on the stage. Eventually, the bra fling became a Little Bear tradition. Much more than just a biker bar, the Little Bear enjoys worldwide fame, its history stretching from a church to a drugstore and dance hall to an auto parts store to a bar and jazz venue to one of Evergreen's biggest tourist attractions today. The Hester and Dollison families were among the ranch families living along today's Buffalo Park Road in the 1870s. Their original properties were divided and bought and sold many times over the years. Sometime in the 1890s, the two-story frame ranch house was built in a similar style to other homes in the area. By 1919, the Topol family owned the property and called it the Buffalo Park Ranch. Edward, E.J., and Arleta Alderfer had been living on the Beaver Brook Ranch along Route 40 when E.J. enlisted in the Army in 1942 and served overseas during World War II. Arleta lived with her parents in Denver during the duration. When E.J. returned in 1945, he learned that the Topol property was about to be offered for sale. He bought the 240-acre ranch with the house, barn, and outbuildings on Christmas Eve, 1945, without telling Arleta. The ranch would be their home, along with their 3 children, for the next 42 years. Beyond the ranching operation, E.J. and Arleta supported the Evergreen community in multiple ways. E.J. served in the Evergreen Volunteer Fire Department, Evergreen Mounted Posse, Buffalo Bill Saddle Club, Evergreen Recreation Association, and he managed the Mountain School Bus System. Arleta was the librarian at Evergreen Junior and Senior High School, helping many students with their reading challenges. After E.J.'s death in 1974, his son Hank Alderfer and his wife, Barbie, lived in the ranch house for another several years. It was Hank who dubbed the Triple Rock Formation east of his house the Three Sisters, after Arleta's mother and her 2 sisters. Between 1977 and 1986, Jefferson County Open Space acquired the Alderfer property, and it became Alderfer Three Sisters Park. Beautiful walking trails were designed and constructed, and the 1,100-acre park has more than 15 miles of hiking, biking, and equestrian trails. Now the Alderfer home has been renovated by Jefferson County Open Space and is used as a ranger residence, while the magnificent mountain vistas, so lovingly preserved by the Alderfer family, can be enjoyed by all. The Bear Creek Cemetery is where many of the pioneers in Evergreen are buried. Here to talk about it is Elaine Hayden, Evergreen historian.
It is often said that a cemetery is a chronicle of an area's history and growth. And that is the case with this Bear Creek Cemetery in Evergreen. A casual walk through the cemetery reveals names that are prominent today. The Andersons, the Schneiders, the Wilmots, the Hesters, the Hicks, the Mallets, and many other founding families. It was one of these founding families, the Mallet family, in 1871, who donated property on this site to build St. Mark's in the Wilderness Episcopal Church. And it wasn't 6 months later when Mallet's neighbor, the little Hester daughter, Emma, passed away, and he allowed that she could be buried on this property. So little Emma Hester, 2 years old, was buried in 1872. So that was the beginning of the Bear Creek Cemetery as we know it today. Little Emma was the first interment. And years later, a neighbor of Mallett's, Dwight Wilmot, sold property, 10 acres of property, to adjacent property with a stipulation that it always serve as a cemetery. And that is officially the beginning of the Bear Creek Cemetery. Now, the church in the wilderness, St. Mark's in the Wilderness, was constructed in 1874 on the site where the shelter house is behind me. And it served the Episcopal community for several years until the congregation was decreasing. And a Methodist group from Sedalia, Colorado, did a deed swap, and they took ownership of the St. Mark's in the Wilderness Church. And they eventually, several years later, the congregation was declining, so they moved the church to Main Street, Evergreen, where the Little Bear Tavern is located now. The Evergreen Cemetery has served Evergreen community for over 100 years, and we have over 1,000 internments here, overseen and managed by a volunteer board of directors who keep the records. This is still an active cemetery and continues to be a chronicle of the growth of Evergreen. The tranquility and the rustic woodland setting of the cemetery offers a haven for mourners and also a final resting place for those who chose Evergreen as home all those many years ago.
In 1951, the present cemetery gateway was donated as a memorial to William and Florence Ames, who died in a tragic car accident. In 1965, American Legion Post Number 80 installed the lighted flagpole in honor of longtime member H.P. Barney Lamer. Cemetery policy says that plots will only be sold to people who are or have been Evergreen residents. Bear Creek Cemetery is still managed by a small volunteer board. The magnitude of support it has received over the years from so many organizations signifies its importance in the community. It is a quiet, peaceful, resting place for those who lived in and loved Evergreen. Even before the Episcopalian mission of the Transfiguration was established in 1899 in the old Stewart Hotel, candidates for ordination had already attended courses there. Eventually, the summer gatherings in Evergreen expanded as part of the National Summer Episcopal Conference movement, which began in 1904 in New Milford, Connecticut. One of the most recognizable Evergreen landmarks, the log bell tower at the Mission of the Transfiguration, was built by Jock Spence in 1911. By 1919, the Evergreen Conference was formally organized with an executive committee of clergymen and laity from across the country. Father Charles Winfred Douglas was the conference's inspirational leader. It was at the meeting house that the conference's musical classes, concerts, and gatherings were held, and the building was decorated with colorful banners. After Father Douglas's death in 1944, his second wife, Anne Woodward Douglas, took over leadership. In the 1980s, the conference suffered from declining attendance. Its buildings went through several owners, but was ultimately saved. In 1979, the area was placed on the National Register of Historic Places as the Evergreen Conference District. The Evergreen Chorale purchased the meeting house, and the Evergreen Players, Evergreen Children's Chorale, and other community groups performed there under its new name, Center Stage.
Hi, my name is Graham Anduri, and I'm the Executive Director for Ovation West Performing Arts. Ovation West owns and operates the historic Center Stage Theater, and Center Stage it continues to be a community resource just as it has been for the past 100 years. Nowadays, we use Center Stage for our own musical theater productions, a concert series, a film series, a summer musical theater camp, and a number of other events that we host for the community throughout the year. On top of that, a number of other community organizations like the Evergreen Players and the Evergreen Children's Chorale, Mountain Youth Musicals, Mountain Film Festival, the Evergreen Jazz Festival, the Evergreen School of Music, and many others call Center Stage their home when it comes to their theater productions, concerts, festivals, and a number of other community events, conferences and meetings and all sorts of things. The Evergreen Chorale, which is the basis for Ovation West Performing Arts, purchased Center Stage back in about 1989. And since that time, we've done over 100 musical theater productions, countless concerts and other community events, and hosted thousands of community members every year. About 10,000 people come through the doors of Center Stage every single year. And we can't wait to continue doing what we love to do here at Center Stage, at the heart of the performing arts in Evergreen.
Just as construction of decent roads into Evergreen with creation of Denver Mountain Parks transformed the Evergreen economy, construction of I-70 in the 1970s changed the whole nature of Evergreen. As the Evergreen population grew, new subdivisions and schools clustered more towards I-70, away from the traditional downtown center, while many of the new residents tended to work in Denver or the downhill suburbs. Over the years, the community has come together to create many new activities at a new nature center and in festivals such as Summerfest, Big Chili, and the annual Jazz Festival. Here to talk a bit about how Evergreen continues to change is Linda Kirkpatrick.
Playing fortune teller, I predict that Evergreen will continue to attract and integrate people with brilliant minds who will find unique ways to make the most of our living in this unincorporated area. That means accomplishing great things in record time, with little red tape, and with a notable sense of excellence. Encouraging newcomers to get involved has set a welcoming tone in our community for many years, and that will perpetuate. To sustain our community as a healthy one, I see us being proactive in recognizing the need for senior housing that is affordable, as well as essential housing for those employees to be able to live where they work. In fact, I see Evergreen becoming the preeminent upscale community to set a new standard for working with providers of those amenities rather than fighting them in the courtroom or in county hearings. Working together has been a tradition here, and it will continue. I see the younger generation eager to step forward and take responsibility for the place they've chosen to live and raise their families. Just as we partnered to save important open spaces like these, I see people who have lived here for a number of years finding creative ways to help the community upon their death, because this is where they lived the best years of their lives. Some will leave a legacy, and some will continue to contribute simply for the love of Evergreen.
As Evergreen celebrates its 150th year, what was once a quiet haven of mountains and meadows has grown into a diverse community. Over the coming years, that community will continue to cherish its environment and create new opportunities. We look forward to the next sesquicentennial.